Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Josie Show. My name is Josie, and I'm the Redheaded Libertarian. My guest today is Kelley Ashby Paul. She is an author, advocate, and writer, and the wife of Senator Rand Paul. A Kentucky native and Rhodes College graduate, she's once again the wife of U.S. Senator Rand Paul and the mother of three sons and a grandmother. She previously wrote True and Constant Friends and co authored The Case Against Socialism, which I have right there in my book stand. Her newest books are patriotic children's titles Goodnight, Little American and Goodnight, Young American, released in 2026 for America's 250th anniversary. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome, Kelley.
Thank you so much, Josie. Great to be with you.
It's so great to be with you. We've been following each other for quite some time, so I'm really glad that this was able to work out. And I was telling you before we got started that I actually got to interview your husband today, which was just great because I've been watching his work for 14 years now. So it was wonderful to be able to have that. And I just get you both on the same day.
That's
Lucky
kind of
me.
fun. Yeah, I just noticed it scrolling on my feed. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, great. Randy and I are both doing the same thing today. So,
Yeah, surprise. We had some complications with his, just the way that it streams, when he's away and that sort of thing. So, but it's all going to be worked out. It's all going to be perfect when it's published because my producer is awesome. So I'm looking forward to it all coming out. All right. So let's talk about your books. And I love that you wrote children's books. And my kids aren't young enough to read them anymore, but I have nieces and I have nephews and they are. So they'll be getting some
oh,
nice Christmas
great.
presents this year. So what specifically sparked the idea, which I read during a family dinner, it was sparked? And how did the concept evolve into two books?
Yes, it was during a family dinner last summer. So we have
Mhm.
one grandchild, and he was only 6 months old last summer. And our son and daughter in law were over for dinner. And we were just kind of chatting. And my daughter in law said, I'm really seeing a lot of woke board books for babies. And she's like, and I'm not really seeing the kind of books that I'm interested in as far as teaching patriotism and inspiring gratitude for our country. And we were just playing around at dinner. She's like, you should write something. And so, literally that night at dinner, playing around with names, I came up with Goodnight, Little American. And she was like, that's it. That's a perfect name. And so, I wrote that one. And that one is, the lullaby book for babies and
Yeah.
toddlers. So, it's the board book, just very sweet little lyrical nursery rhymes. And I wrote that one, a few weeks later. I just kind of came up with it. I had a long flight to California, wrote it. And when I sent it to my publisher, they said, wow, we love this. Perfect for America's 250. But we would like you to consider writing a more advanced book for, not advanced, but like ages 4 to 8, a picture book that actually goes into a little bit more detail. So I came up with the idea of my little protagonist, my little boy,
Mhm.
celebrating 4th of July with his mom and dad and asking his dad, what's it all about? What are we celebrating? And his father explains the Declaration of Independence. And he reads that night with his parents some books about our history and places like, where Paul Revere wrote in Boston. And his parents are kind of saying, one day we'll go visit these places. And then that night, when he falls asleep, he dreams all of American Revolutionary history. So his dream starts at the Mayflower. So he's a pilgrim and he's a colonist. And then he makes friends with Sam Adams and he joins the
Mhm.
Sons of Liberty and he's at the Green Dragon and he takes part in the Boston Tea Party and rides with Paul Revere. And it's just all the revolutionary heroes. Ben Franklin, of course, are in there, all from a child's perspective. And it ends with George Washington being sworn in as our first president in New York. And I just try to put history in there. I mean, he's there for the signing of the Declaration and he swings on the Liberty Bell. And when I was writing them, I realized, wow, American Revolutionary history is so visual. It is such an incredible adventure story. You couldn't even make it up if you think about how,
Mhm.
what improbable odds it was, the bravery that it took, and just the exciting moments that were really the founding of our country.
I love that you did that. What I do on X is I tell stories about revolutionary history. my audience is obviously, high school age to 88, like I go to all the way to 100, but I don't have much for the younger generation. But when I talk about it, I try to not swear in, ways that are geared toward
Sure.
like homeschooling and that sort of thing. But you took a whole different audience that I don't have yet, and we're able to explain to them revolutionary history, which I love. I'm so glad that you did that. I really think there was a market for it and you cornered it. So that's
Thank
just
you. Well,
so amazing.
I have enjoyed many of your posts and have learned a
Mhm.
lot through them. So I love that
Thank
you do
you.
that.
Thank
That's a
you so
really
much.
refreshing thing to come through your feed. And I always look forward to your posts about history and particularly revolutionary history. So
Thank you so much. That was what I when I got on the internet and I started talking about it and people were listening and they're like, I didn't learn that in high school. And when I do everything, it's all, source documents. I've got the Federalist Papers over here. I do everything from the source. I go to old newspapers and I learn things that I had no idea existed. And the writing is so eloquent. If you're reading through, if you're reading through old newspapers, you got to get into like a rhythm of how to read them because the S's look like F's and there's,
I
it's written it's very dignified the way that they wrote. So, but once you get into the routine of reading it, it's just, it's fascinating what they wrote about. I could just read stories in old newspapers for hours and not get bored.
wow. I
Mhm.
believe it. I mean, they did speak so eloquently, wrote so eloquently, even without formal education. Did you do a post on Joseph Warren? You
Yes,
bring
yes, I
around-
did. I love
so
him.
little interesting side note. So for our town, Randy and I live in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and
Yeah.
our town, Bowling Green, was having their little America's 250 celebration down on the town square. Our mayor was
Mhm.
dressing up like George Washington, and our judge executive was dressed up like Abraham Lincoln, and they invited Rand to speak. And so we were here. We wanted to go
Mhm.
see our little grandson in a Fourth of July parade that morning. And so we were not in DC for the Fourth. We were here at our real
Mhm.
home in Kentucky. So Rand was writing his speech. They said, yeah, we just want like 5 or 6 minutes. It's really hard. It's like, okay, it's people are out having fun. They're eating ice cream. And he wanted to speak, but he didn't want it to be too detailed. And he certainly did not want to dress up. The newspaper
Of
was
course.
hilarious. It was like, the mayor will be dressed up as George Washington. Judge Executive Doug Gorman will be Abe Lincoln. And Rand Paul will be appearing as himself. My point about Joseph Warren is
Mhm.
that our county is Warren County, named for Joseph Warren.
I
And
love
so,
that.
Rand spoke about that and how he was killed at Bunker Hill, and people really don't remember him that much in history because he died so young and he was such a brave patriot. And Rand actually also quoted by memory like 4 or 5 stanzas of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, Longfellow's Midnight Ride of Paul Revere,
Mhm.
which I was very impressed. He had them on note cards and he got up there and there was no podium. And he's like, all right, I'm going to start in on this and I better hope I can. I can't, there's nothing to look down at. And it was really fun. So it was a really neat kind of little bite of history that connected
Mhm.
our county, Warren County, Kentucky, to the revolution on the 250th birthday.
I love that so much. Dr. Joseph Warren, he's a doctor like Rand Paul is. He's one of my favorites. We share a birthday actually. He organized the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere and William Dodds and Samuel Prescott. And that was all him. And he was the one, I've often compared him to Charlie Kirk. He was the one that was supposed to be the president. He was the one that never got to grow up, essentially. Like I think he died at 34.
Yes.
So he was, yeah, so he died young at Bunker Hill. And that day at Bunker Hill, he actually been promoted. He'd been promoted to like a colonel or a major. He was up there where he didn't have to be fighting down there, but he said no. He's like, I didn't earn this. I'm going to be fighting right down there with my men. And he was recognized because of who he was, and then he was killed. He was killed. He was shot in the head, and his body was desecrated and buried in a shallow grave. And the Redcoats made fun of him after they did that. And it was Paul Revere and Dr. Joseph Warren's brother John that searched for 9 months to find his body, and they did. They found his body, and they recognized his body based on because it'd been 9 months. It was the first ever. recognition through dental work. So Paul Revere had fashioned this gold, like I don't know what it would have been called, but it was something to like hold a tooth in your mouth. And
Mhm.
he'd fashioned it because he was a silversmith. And so that's how they knew that they had found Dr. Joseph Warren's body.
Goodness.
Yes,
Oh,
and
that's
so
incredible. So
they were
poignant,
able to
so
find him
sad.
and
And then my county is named after him, which again, and you should have seen people's, when Randy's speaking, I'm always looking at the crowd, right? I want to gauge how
mhm,
people are reacting. Is this connecting? And people were really not, they were really interested to know this bit of history. And that's what our county's named up. I certainly didn't know it.
mhm,
So I just, I wanted America's 250 to really be a jumping off point for people to kind of have a renewed appreciation for our founders and a renewed sense of interest in our great history.
of course, yes. So while you were writing your book, how did you balance making the history accurate yet engaging and it's whimsical? I mean, I'm looking at the pictures and it's like a dream and it's so beautiful the way that the words combine with the pictures and it's age appropriate. So were there any challenges in balancing making the history accurate with making it
So
dreamlike?
for Young American, the artist was Marika Monase, super talented,
Mhm.
so much fun working with her. Um, and yes, I wanted it to be dynamic. So, for example, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. I mean, obviously, it's a room full of men looking at a paper, right? That's not going to be interesting to a child. So I was like, have our little boy running up, to the bell tower and swinging on the Liberty Bell. So obviously, I took license there, but then if you look at the text, I wanted to be really rich in detail so that older kids, would really, as they, an 8 or 9 year old could really read about this and kind of
Mhm.
digest a little bit about what they were doing, the purpose of it. I listed a few of the people that were there, but I also wanted it to be dynamic and not have the illustrations just be men looking at a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Sort of the same with Ben Franklin. He's one of my favorite founders and such an incredible mind and a brilliant man. And I mean,
Mhm.
what's more exciting to look at than flying a kite in a thunderstorm, right? So,
Mhm.
and Marika, as you've probably noticed, my little boy's dog is with him through all of this. So the dog is like
Yes.
jumping up and trying to hold on to the kite, and the dog is in the little saddlebag when he's riding with Paul Revere, and the dog is always with him. Rand had some suggestions on the art as well. I have to give him credit for
Mhm.
one of my favorite illustrations is the King of England reading the Declaration and being angry. And I think one of Marika's earlier drawings of that, I didn't know. I mean, I showed it to Rand. I said, "This is great, the expression." He's like, "Yeah, but he's got to be fatter." King George was famously fat. He needs to be a fat king. So just kind of stuff like that. It was really fun.
Uh-huh.
It was so fun working on this, and I have to be honest. I actually it learned a lot myself. I mean, just
Mhm.
working on the book and trying to make it something that kids could digest, but also be accurate.
Mhm. What was your favorite scene of both the books?
Oh gosh, I have to say my favorite scene in the baby book. Um,
Mhm.
is probably this really dreamy scene of the little boy on the boat with George Washington crossing the Delaware, and the spread is he's sleeping in his bed. I love that one. Um,
Mhm.
and I will actually really like him sitting with Thomas Jefferson as well. So that's the baby one. For
Uh-huh.
my Goodnight Young American, I'd have to say I think she did a gorgeous job also with the crossing of the Delaware scene. Oh, here's the Fat King. I do like that one.
Yes.
So angry. And then, my little character, he's so proud with George Washington. And
Mhm.
there's his dog, even his dog is proud. Um, so that's just the fun thing about, and I love this image
Mhm.
as well. I just
Yes.
think working on children's books was so fun because I love art and I love working with creative people. And this artist was really really talented. I do love the Midnight Ride as well, since
Oh,
we're talking about Dr.
yes.
Joseph Warren and Paul Revere and my little guys, his little dogs in there with them. So
Oh.
Anyway, it was a great experience, and I've just loved. I've been going to libraries, and I've been having all kinds of events with kids, and there's just nothing more rewarding than that.
What I love about how proud the little boy is in Young American is it's showing that it's okay to be proud of our history because we're taught to like be ashamed of our history or we're taught the ugly parts of our history in school. But you're like, no, like I'm gonna write this book and this little boy is gonna be like standing there with pride and he's gonna be being looked at with pride and that's what we need. That's what that those are the kind of children that we need to grow up into adults to keep this country beautiful.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. I do hate this, all of our history suddenly being taught through this lens of oppressor versus oppressed, or
Mhm.
these brave men that, like we're talking about, who risked their very lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor, everything, to build this country based on what at that time was a very radical idea. The
Yeah.
radical idea that your rights come from your creator, the idea that you don't get your rights from a king or a government, that
Mhm.
was a crazy radical idea in 1776. Everyone accepted the divine right of kings and hereditary rule. And they were really taking, our founders were really taking Enlightenment ideals and coming up with this idea that we're going to create a government and a country based on consent of the people, by the people, for the people. And they had everything to lose in kind of pushing forward this radical idea, because they weren't radicals, right? They were lawyers and merchants and farmers and
Mhm.
doctors, and they had everything to lose to push this forward. And they did it with great bravery and courage. And I hate that now it just seems like so many in academia and in child, and even in elementary education, just want to denigrate them in this very sort of flat, one-dimensional thing of, oh, colonizer, enslaver, stolen land, all the stuff that
Mhm.
we're hearing. We really should be proud of our country.
Now, what conversations do you hope that this will incite between like children and their parents? Like, what do you hope that you could spark from writing these?
Well, one of the reasons there's a map at the back was I
Mhm.
loved the idea of parents reading these books to their kids and then maybe planning a trip and maybe going to Boston, one of my favorite cities. And, you can go to Boston and there are kids' activities there that you can take part in a mock Boston Tea Party, or you can
Mhm.
see the actual route that Paul Revere rode, or go to Philadelphia. So I think that that was one of the things I was hoping that kids would get excited about, seeing these things, or coming to Washington, D.C. and learning more. I love when our constituents bring their kids up to DC and we take them on tours. So that was one. And the other was just feeling a sense of pride and that they're part of this story. I still remember, I'm very much dating myself here, but I was 12 years old in 1976, the bicentennial.
Mhm.
And I got so excited in the bicentennial. I mean, and so did all my friends. Now, this was a simpler time. You didn't have all the, no social media. Everyone was really watching the same television. And I
Mhm.
grew up in a very, very small town. So there wasn't a lot else to do. But let me tell you, I had the bonnet, I had a full length dress made, I had the pinafore, like
Mhm.
apron. So did my mother. So did all of our friends. Our whole town turned out. I mean, we had parades, we had little plays. And as a little girl, I remember feeling that this was my story, that
Mhm.
I felt a great pride, like these incredible, brave patriots who had done all these brave and noble things, that had created this country, that had started the freest, most generous nation in the world, that I was part of that story. I felt like that. And I want kids to feel like that now. I think stories are important. I think having a broader sense of your history and your ancestors makes you live in a broader way. And
Mhm.
that's what I hope these books will help to bring about.
Absolutely. Now, you'd mentioned the map in the back of the book and all the wonderful sites. Do you have memories with your children about going to any historic sites, whether it's Philadelphia or Virginia or Boston?
I do. Well, the one that pops into my head first was the Alamo for going down to visit in
It
Texas.
counts.
I do remember that. We had a great, everybody was totally into the Alamo.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, we took our kids up to DC several times. Of course, when Ron was in office, and they were all like always super into it. Monticello, Mount Vernon. I remember Rand making really corny dad jokes about when we were coming home from Monticello. Oh, we're back at Monte Paulo now. I mean,
That's such a dad joke.
why do you remember such things, right? That stick in your mind. But yeah, I do, and we never got our kids to Boston, but maybe I'll take my grandson now that I have these
Yes.
books.
Absolutely. You take your grandson and you got to do all when you're in Boston, you got to do all the history there. And I say this because I grew up in Massachusetts.
Oh, you did?
So yes, I did. I grew up in the western part of the state where there's Sturbridge and Deer and Old Deerfield, and there's more older history there, like the King Philip's War and that sort of thing when you're more on that side of the state. But Boston side, you go to the Freedom Trail, you go see the Paul Revere House and the John Hancock House, and you got to go to Salem too because we gotta bring it all. You got to come full circle with all the history in Boston.
That's
It's got a
right.
lot to offer,
It,
and then
it
hit one of the beaches for sure.
it really does. Yep. No,
Mhm.
Rand and I did actually. Rand and I were there. He had is it Deaconess Hospital in Boston? Is it Deaconess? What's the name of the big hospital? And there's Mass Eye and Ear. I know.
Mhm.
When we were
Yeah.
young, married, and Rand was in his residency, he had quite a few friends who were working and doing their residencies in and around Boston. So we had
Mhm.
several trips up there when we were young, and then we'd go out to Cape Cod and everything, have lobster, do all the things. It's one of my favorite cities.
Yes, I really I moved during the pandemic just because they weren't handling it properly. Moved down to Florida and there was no pandemic. It didn't exist. So it was a totally different world and was the right decision. But I miss the history. I miss the seasons. I miss everything that it had up there. My family, my friends. But this wasn't the right place for to raise my family, and Florida is. But I do hope I can get up there and actually take them to more of the history that I got to grow up. Like field trips, all field trips were to all these history places. But
Yeah,
when we're up there, I moved down. My kids were like 11 and 10, and they had just gone through pandemic, so they didn't get any of the cool field trips that I did. So I'm gonna have to do that with them now that maybe on one of our trips back up there for sure.
yeah,
All right. You're an English major?
I am.
Yep. So as an English major and a previous nonfiction author, how was this writing different for you?
Oh, it was very different. I mean, working on the books with Rand, we had
Hmm.
I worked on Deception, the Great COVID Cover Up, also in addition to the Case Against Socialism. We had
Hmm.
our sort of routine. Rand would write some things and then submit to me, and then I would work on some, we sort of divided up. Especially in the Case Against Socialism, I wrote a lot of the sections and researched a lot of the sections on what they're doing in Scandinavia. Then I would look at his stuff, and we just would then over on the weekends because he's in DC during the week. He'd come
Hmm.
home, and we'd kind of bounce back and forth with each other. It was a much different experience than writing, of course, the kids' books, which I don't know. I talked to myself a lot. Like I was in the kitchen, I would try to read everything out loud because that's the way you
Uh-huh.
read kids' books, right? So
Yeah.
I would write something and then I'd see how it felt in my ear and how I imagine myself reading it to a child. And so that's was sort of my way to write these. Yeah.
What was the most surprising thing to you that when you were writing and you kind of took this different direction?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I really felt like they came together pretty quickly. And like I said, probably surprisingly that I needed to learn some things myself. I was trying to make a good narrative arc and
Uh-huh.
trying to figure out a good place to start and stop. I definitely wanted the Constitution in there. I wanted my favorite Ben Franklin, so I had to find a way to work him in there. I sort of
Hmm.
my little boy, he's making friends with people, so I think I wrote that he's talking about the Declaration. He's talking about Ben Franklin being in there. And then the next day, I wanted him to be flying the kite. So I just sort of said, Ben Franklin's here to help Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence. He's an amazing inventor. Once I was at his house in a big thunderstorm. And so sort of I tried to connect it to where the boys always has a relationship with all of these people and make it fluid. But
Mhm.
obviously, this is all happening over several years.
Of course.
I gave a speech over the weekend, and this was kind of fun, or last week actually, to 500 farmers and agricultural professionals in Kentucky right before
Mhm.
um, Fancy Farm, which is our big, Kentucky political picnic. And I gave it on Thursday night. And since I was talking to farmers, um, and I was telling a little bit about the books, but I also read part of a letter that George Washington wrote to my ancestors. So
Wow.
I have an uncle, my father's younger brother really got into genealogy about 15 years ago. And
Mhm.
he discovered that we had two ancestors, Captain John and Captain Stephen Ashby, that fought under George Washington in the Revolution. And one of them, Captain John Ashby, actually fought when George Washington was just a lieutenant in the French and Indian Wars. And so we were all like very proud. Oh my goodness. And then Robert Ashby was a surveyor with him. So we had all these
Mhm.
relatives. My dad's name is Hilton Ashby. And so he's like, wow, this is so cool. So Fred brings over these letters one Christmas and we're all excited. This is a letter from George Washington to Captain John Ashby. Then we
Mhm.
start reading it and it starts out Captain John Ashby's second company of Rangers. Although I am credibly told that it was purchased by Joseph Coombs, the rum, I am credibly informed, is your property. And so, because George Washington was famously moral, like he did not want
Mhm.
swearing, he did not want alcohol. Think about it. They are suffering dysentery, they're freezing to death, and they're not even cussing. And this
Mhm.
letter goes on and on. It says, I am told that your wife is chief of every mutiny and she shouldn't even be in the camp. And if she is still there, I will drive her out myself. And if I hear any more reports of irregular behavior and
Oh
rum
my god.
camp, Captain John Ashby, I will suspend you. I mean, we were dying. We're like, oh, we were so proud of our relative. And now it's kind of like, okay, reprobate.
Oh my god, he got dragged by George
He
Washington.
did completely.
I've
Threatened to be
actually
suspended, busted out for having rum, and apparently a crazy wife. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it was very funny to read.
Yeah, fact about him is that nickname was Rufus. I've heard of him. I didn't know he was related to you.
Who?
Captain John Ashby, his
Oh, you've
nickname was
heard of him?
Rufus.
Oh,
Yeah.
you didn't see?
Yeah,
Wow,
it's
you
like
know a lot of
the
history.
way, yeah, I came across him, like that just jumped out to me because of the last name connection. And I was like, oh, and all that I remember is that his nickname was Rufus, but in whatever I'd read about him at that time. That's what I told you. I read old stuff and it just,
Wow. All
his
right.
nickname was Rufus.
I was not aware of that. You know more about John Ashby than I do. All I really mostly know is about this really embarrassing letter.
Yeah. Well, is he a grandfather or a cousin or an
I'm not
uncle?
exactly sure. I think it's great uncle. I think it's like six greats or whatever to an
Uh-huh.
uncle. But it's definitely direct line to my father. And
Hmm.
then the National Archives is so amazing. So when we found these letters, we were able to actually, my uncle had facsimiles. We were actually able to see some of them in the National Archives, the actual
Hmm.
letters.
Wow.
And then we went down to the basement of the archives and they pulled a pay stub of a relative of Rand's. I forget his name, something, something. It was one of Rand's relatives. He
Uh-huh.
was private and he was complaining because he wasn't getting his pension. And he was
Mm.
complaining to who his senior officer had been, which was one of my relatives. So
Oh
Rand's
my
like, oh,
god.
yeah, we're always working for the Ashbys in this family.
Oh wow. That
Isn't that
is that is
crazy?
crazy. That's an insane story.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know. One
always
of my
working.
favorite things to do when people come to visit DC is take them to the National Archives, and we are so fortunate as since Rand is a senator, I can usually like call ahead and just say, can you find anything on this person or that person? So if you're ever coming to DC, we'll have since you're such a fan of Revolutionary history, we'll go. I'll take you down and we'll take you into the basement and you can look at some of these things up close. To me, there's nothing that really brings history home more than seeing handwriting, seeing the actual signature of,
Mhm.
George Washington and the Continental Congress electing him, or um, once they brought the Louisiana Purchase, which is, of course, it was the French had the document. And
Uh-huh.
unlike all of the simple parchment documents in the US, this one was covered in purple velvet and it had
Wow.
gold brocade. And when they opened it up, you see Napoleon's signature, just huge because, he had such an ego. And just seeing those signatures, you're just like, I can't believe I'm looking at the real document.
Oh my God. And I would love that. I've never been, and it is like a dream of mine to go there and to see. I probably cry, honestly, just because this is my life and just to have it all
Yeah.
like
Well,
come
all
come
right.
full circle
Next
like
time
that.
you're coming to DC, call me, DM,
Yes,
whatever, call me, and we can arrange to do a little archives tour.
I love that. I have one relative that is revolution that I know about so far. I just recently started my ancestry path, and he went by Yankee John.
Love
So he
it.
had like a cool nickname. And they called him that because I guess he was from like Connecticut and he moved down to South Carolina, so he was Yankee John because he was a Southern implant. And I'm like, oh, I'm a Southern implant, so that's kind of cool the way that it all comes full circle like that,
Yeah,
huh? Mm-hmm.
I love it.
So yeah, your Uncle Rufus though, your great Uncle Rufus.
Yeah, he was kind of a mess, wasn't he? Really had a messy wife too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, scolding him over that. That's incredible. It's so cool that you have such your husband and your family is just a big part of history. Your father-in-law, a big part of like just American history, and then you have it dating all the way back. Even if Iran gets in trouble sometimes too by the president. So I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's
oh yeah,
all it's all
that's
it's all
true.
living out the way that it's supposed to be. And there's supposed to be that constant pull anyway. It's supposed to be a constant, like a three-way tug is how that they wanted to understand the separation of powers and that sort of thing. So I love it when people are actually pushing back, whether it's in the Senate, whether it's in Congress against the president, against the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court pushing back against the president, against Congress. I love that because that's the way it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to be on this very stringent, everybody agrees with everything, because then
Right.
we're no better than a monarchy or a dictatorship. So, all
100,
right.
100. I agree
Yes.
so much. Yeah, actually, Ron Paul, so my wonderful father-in-law, he was actually reading the books Under the Liberty Tree in Texas last weekend. Our whole family went down, and all the nieces and nephews. Rand's got a really big family. They're like 18
Yes.
great grands, and they're 18 grands, and then at least as
Oh,
many great grands. And so all the littles were under the Liberty Tree, and Ron was reading the books to them, and Carol, and it was really sweet.
oh, yes, I saw the video of that. That was so sweet. And I love that he has a Liberty tree. I love that. We had a Liberty tree in Boston during the time of the founding, and they cut it down. The Redcoats cut it down, or the
Oh,
Loyalists cut it down. So I love that he has one in his yard, and that's the Liberty tree. I
yeah.
love that. I actually have a picture of your father-in-law right behind me. A baseball card type thing. Yeah,
He's so
he's
great.
he's
He's
a
great. He's
great,
almost
great.
91 and he's still doing his live stream show. I mean, he's just incredible.
He just keeps going and going, and that's he's just gonna have such a long, happy life just because, and he's had one already, and he's not ready to stop, and that's what keeps you young, and he's got all the grandkids that surround him, and he's just staying young.
Yeah.
I hope he's around for a long time more because he's just such a inspiration and such a good human, and it's so great. You just are in such great family, such a
Thank
great
you.
family.
Very blessed.
All right. How has becoming a grandmother influenced this project and your view of American history in general?
Well, he was the inspiration for sure. Like I said, I have to give
Mhm.
my daughter-in-law, Kate Paul, a lot of credit for really encouraging me to do this
Mhm.
and giving me the idea. And yeah, just I feel very strongly looking at him that I want him to have the great childhood that I had and even my kids had, and I feel like it's
Mhm.
somewhat slipping away. There's so much more social media even now than when my kids were growing up. They're all in their
Mm.
20s and early 30s, and Gosh, I love the power of books, real books. That's what I want for him. I want him to have that running in the sprinkler, running around outside. It's probably why you moved to Florida, just having, real books to read, and
Mhm.
having that wonderful childhood where you're just not bothered by all this noise on social media.
Exactly. It is. I'm not raising iPad kids, and I know you didn't either. But just to have that real childhood, to ride your bike to your friend's house and go to the park and play a pickup game of basketball, and that's what my kids do. They're like
Yeah,
they're not on social media. They love being outside and seeing their friends. And I'm glad that your children are raising your grandson to be like that, and you're doing that, and you did that, and that's the way forward.
I think so.
No more iPad kids. Yes,
I
exactly.
think so.
Uh, you said we've gotten away from celebrating the founders as heroes. What do you see as the stakes for the next generation when it comes to America's 250th? What are the stakes?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, so let me try to reword it. You So why is it important, essentially? Why is this so important? I mean, we're not going to have another milestone for 50 years. So
Mhm.
why is it so important now to get this, to hold on to this, to keep this, to remember this, to make this blow up?
I think Daniel Webster really said it best. He said at the funeral of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, he said that we must remember our founding documents. I can't quote it exactly, but he was just like, Thomas Jefferson and Adams are no more, but there will never
Mhm.
be a time where the American Revolution will not be the most consequential and important, event in all of human history. And I
Mhm.
think he saw a lack of understanding or a failure to keep alive an appreciation for our founding documents as a definite threat to the future of the country. I feel like our founders really left us a legacy,
Mhm.
and the least we can do to appreciate and honor the heritage that we have and the freedom we have is to, pass it on to the next generation and make sure that they understand the beauty of our founding documents and the beauty of the Constitution and the way our country was designed.
It's a great answer. And I love that you brought up Webster. He was actually referencing, when he said that, a conversation between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson from maybe 10 years before they died. They'd gone through a period where they weren't speaking. And
Right.
then about 10 years later, Adams reached out and pretty much said, we have to keep talking. And eventually we're going to figure all this out. But that was something that they said in those letters, that how important this was, how consequential this was, how memorable it was, and no matter what happens to them and how things change, it's always going to be memorable. So I love that was like pulled, and that kind of all came full circle with their deaths. Which, for those listeners who don't know, if you've been living under a rock, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died on the same day, about 6 hours apart. I actually have a really neat theory about that.
And also,
So
wasn't it 50 years exactly to the
50
day
years to
on
the day
July
of the
4th?
signing.
Yeah,
That's something. That's God right there.
I think so.
Um, so John Adams died 6 hours after Thomas Jefferson, right? His last words were Jefferson lives. And my thought as a Catholic and just a Christian in general is that Thomas Jefferson came to help John Adams cross over, and being dying and all of that, and just maybe seeing him and saying, well, I'm going to go, but Jefferson lives, because there he is. He's right in front of me. That's my only thought, is 6 hours apart. That I think that it's,
I am blown away. I did not know those were his last words.
yeah. And so everyone's like, well, it's strange, like he said that, but Thomas Jefferson died first. And I'm like, oh, well,
No, I'm with
maybe
you. I'm with you. I feel like Jefferson came to him.
Jefferson must have come to him and help him cross over. And, Adams, like, who had he's dying. Some people just probably thought he was senile or something, but I think that's what happened, because nobody knew he died. It was 6 hours apart. There was no way to get notice that quickly. To nobody knew, but I think on some level he knew because I think he was there. So
Mhm.
just a neat little story.
That gives me chills. I love that. I did not know those were his last words.
Hmm. Oh, I have a question here that I wrote down, but you already answered it. It was Rand was involved in the drafts, and what was your favorite story? And it sounds like it was the King George story, but is there another one?
Uh, no, I think that was the only one where he was,
That's a big one.
I would just read him and show him pictures, and I think that was the only one. I that he actually said, "No, you need to go back to the draft." And well, actually, I think he did. At one point, he said I needed to spread it out a little bit, add some more
Mm.
pages. He's like, you need a little more time here to tell the whole story. And it did involve adding some more pages. And I think that ended up being the king because we were trying,
Mhm.
with the children's book, I wanted to, it's kind of a fine line. I want to have a lot of information, but you have to have, you can't have your pages be too packed just with text. So we had fun going back and forth. It sparked a lot of conversations even with us. I really loved working on them.
Do you have any more plans for any more children's books or sequels or any related projects, like as your grandson gets older?
Well, we'll see. I don't know. I don't know. We'll just
You
see what
never
happens.
know. When the
That's right.
inspiration could spark, it could be another dinner and he could be turning 14 and you could be like, "Yep, I got an idea." You never
That's
know.
true. No, like I
Uh-huh.
said, I didn't even really plan on this. It kind of happened very organically. So,
Mhm. You know something you could do? I'm just having inspiration now as somebody who talks about revolutionary history is you could do board books for young Americans and focus just on one story at a time and expand it that way. So Boston Tea Party, whole
right.
story about Boston Tea
Oh,
Party.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, and that's I mean, Boston Tea Party, that already sounds like it's a child's book.
You're right.
There's
You're
a
right.
million different
That's what I
ways.
mean. The stories of our revolution are so visual. They are such grand adventure stories. No,
Mhm.
that's a great idea. I love it. I hope none of your listeners take it from me before I can come up with it.
No, no, this is Kelley Paul, TM, trademarking
That's
this.
that's right. We're trademarking it right now. No, I do think that's a great idea because
Mhm.
I mean, come on. How cool is it that the Sons of Liberty were meeting at the Green Dragon Tavern? I mean, it's
Exactly.
just
You know, another neat story that kids could find interesting, Ben Franklin, he actually he hosted this picnic and he was going to cook a turkey by electrocuting it. That was the whole idea of the picnic, and he electrocuted himself.
oh really?
Yeah. So I mean, that's hilarious to a child. I mean, maybe not like a 2-year-old, but when you're
Yeah.
getting up there, like, yeah, he tried to cook a turkey and he got, electrocuted. Anything like that, like flying a kite, and
He
it all
was
sounds
such a
that way.
genius. I was reading, thinking of all the things he invented. Of course, we know
Uh-huh.
the bifocals, but he also apparently invented a urinary catheter.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
know he suffered from bladder
Yeah.
stones. He was in a lot of pain. I mean, think
Mhm.
about life back then, right? No modern medicine, no modern pain relief. And he invented this. And I'm just like, wow, without plastic, I don't know. I don't know many details, but I was pretty blown away that that was listed as one of his inventions.
He was brilliant and he was funny. He was brilliant and he was funny. Um, and he always knew how to like make an entrance too. So he had gout, so he couldn't walk half the time. So I think it was, I'm trying to think of which document. I think it was the first constitutional convention, maybe. I can't remember which one, but anyway, he had prisoners from the debtor's jail carry him carry him into Pennsylvania into
On a
that house.
litter.
Yes, they were each had it was what is it called? I can't remember the name. It's a
Oh my
chair
gosh.
that sits on bars and they hold the
It's a
bars up
litter. It's
and
called a
he
litter.
yes, yes, and he got paraded to go to a meeting or go sign. It might have been Declaration of Independence or Second Continental Congress. I can't remember exactly what it was, but yes, he got paraded in. So there's so many stories that you could turn into children's books, just like little things, like Ben Franklin. Just oh my gosh, you could write a
Right.
novel on him.
You
He's
really could.
so funny, so incredible, so smart, and so witty. They didn't want him to author the Declaration of Independence because they thought he was going to slip a joke into it and they would miss it. They were sure. They were sure. So when it came down to deciding who was going to write the Declaration of Independence, it was either going to be Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, or Ben Franklin. John Adams is like, no, he's like, I'm not eloquent at all. And so he's like, I'm going to put all my energy behind Thomas Jefferson. And Congress is like, listen, you got to rally everybody because we don't want Ben Franklin to do this because he's going to put a joke into it. Yep. So he was able to rally everybody. And honestly, Thomas Jefferson was the most eloquent writer of the time. It was,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
John Adams once said, he's like, 4 of my letters couldn't equal 1 of yours. He was just so in the way that he spoke. And John Adams was eloquent himself, but he had so much admiration. So that's why we don't have a joke in the Declaration of Independence that we know about.
That's right.
Yes, Ben Franklin did help with
He
editing it.
famously make the one joke though that the final line of the Declaration, which I find the most poignant, right? It is with let's see, in support of this declaration, with firm reliance on divine providence, we mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred
honor. Yes.
And they knew they were putting their lives on the line. And then I guess it's lore, but didn't he famously quip, we must all hang together, for surely they will hang us separately, or
Yes,
something?
he said that. Yes, that's legitimate. Also, he helped edit because they're like, all right, we're going to let you help edit, but nothing else. Like, that's what you're going to do.
Right.
So he was on the committee of 5 to help edit. And Thomas Jefferson had originally said, we hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable in the first draft. And he's like, no, he's like, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Because sacred and undeniable almost put it in somebody else's hands, which, and he's like, no, like self-evident, like it's within you. It's within you. And so that's why that's in there. And every line had to be unanimous in the Declaration of Independence. And that's what everybody voted on, was self-evident. So yeah, just an incredible, incredible person, Ben Franklin.
He really was.
All right. So favorite reactions so far from kids and parents who've read your book?
Oh my goodness. I have to say, there was a little boy at a library in Bardstown, and I was reading the book, and I don't know, he was probably 7 or 8. And I was so impressed. I was holding up this page where I was talking about Cornwallis surrendering to George Washington. And the little boy immediately said, oh, I see those ships. The French were helping us. Before I even got to that part, this little kid already was like, yeah, the French really helped us.
Wow.
I'm impressed.
Oh my
I said to
goodness.
his grandmother had brought him there. I was like, I can't believe he knew that. She's like, oh yeah, he loves history. So
Oh
kids do
wow.
live all this stuff,
I know adults that don't know that the French helped us.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I was so impressed.
So where can people find these books, buy these books, and support you?
They are everywhere books are sold. They're on barnesandnoble.com. On Amazon. They're on christianbook.com. And they're in stores as well. I'm not sure. I know Barnes and Noble in our town has them, but most of the stores, I think they're also, my niece told me she saw them in Books A Million in their store. So yeah, they're everywhere.
Oh, awesome. And I'm sure they can find them online on Amazon, on
Yes.
all the places. Beautiful.
Yes. Or they can
right.
find me on any of my social media. I have links to them all as well. So
What is your social media?
at KelleyAshbyPaul.
Okay. And that's across all, so
Yes.
X, Facebook. Okay, cool. All right. So
Facebook
that-
and Instagram, and yeah. I probably have more on Instagram about my books, just because it's more visual, and a lot of people don't want their kids on X just because it's
Yeah, you got some creepy fellows over there on X.
So I tend to put more, I just feel like Instagram is a little bit more of a loving atmosphere, right?
Yes, for sure. They always say I'm gonna have to follow you over on Instagram. I'm not very big over there or anything. It's mostly just like pictures from my adventures, but they're always like, oh, Instagram makes everybody feel bad. I'm like, I want to see everybody doing great. I love Instagram. I love seeing the highlights of my friends and family's lives. I love that,
Right.
People should look at Instagram.
I think it's because it's a little more visual, and I think you might have to have your real name or something. I don't know. I just don't find that there is as much sort of vitriolic response. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love X, and I think Elon is a complete hero for buying it, and we wouldn't, know so many things without people being able to, challenge the mainstream media narrative and get things out on X. So I do like it more for political stuff, but for the books, I've kind of enjoyed Instagram more.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's because you can't quote tweet on there. You can't do a quote. So you can't bring more people into it to like dogpile. And because
Right.
Instagram doesn't have that feature. And I think that that helps keep things sort of more civil over there. I enjoy going over there when I have a stressful day on X. I just turn it off and I hop on Instagram and,
Right.
it's all just like sunsets and food pictures and your kids doing amazing things. And I'm just like, I love that. I want to see that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful to me. All right, last question. What do you hope little readers will take away as they fall asleep to your stories?
Oh, well, I want them to be, maybe have a dream. Like,
Mhm.
I love to inspire dreams. And so maybe have a wonderful dream. And I want them to have a sense of gratitude and wonder for their country. Um, my last page of this one, Rand's mom was reading it, and it says, "The future of our country shines in your eyes so bright. Sweet dreams, little American. I love you. Good night." And she
Oh.
started crying, and it just really touched me. My sister-in-law sent me this video of her. We were down there last weekend, but she had
Mhm.
said, "Oh, Lovey got your books," and here she is reading it. And when she read that last line, she started choking up. And I think it's because, I mean, she's 90 years old, and I think she just had those memories of reading that kind of cadence to all of her five kids and her grandkids. And I don't know, it really touched my heart that she was moved by the books.
And watching her husband fight his whole life to keep this country beautiful and watching her, Rand do this and just beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
an amazing woman. Yeah,
Mhm.
she really is. So is he. They're both. I'm very blessed with my in-laws. I love them so much. They're amazing.
Mhm. I love your in-laws too. And the whole country does. Any people in the liberty movement do. We're so grateful. So grateful. I'm just so wonderful to talk to you today. I do want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Josie. I had a ball. And call me if you're
Absolutely.
coming to DC. We'll get together.
I will. I will. I definitely that we would have so much fun in DC. Wow.
Yes.
Yes, for sure. All right. I'm gonna have you hang out with me after I close down to make sure everything uploads okay. But
Okay.
everybody, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. God bless you and stay free.